Why don't we get started? I imagine some people will be coming in over the next few minutes, but I know that people have places to go and people to see by 1 o'clock, not to mention grabbing some lunch along the way. So first, I'd just like to welcome everybody to the State of the College Address for the year 2020, the year of the eye examination. And I thought that perhaps the way to really kick this off is to take a little bit of a look, not at the future immediately, but looking at the past first. So first, just a call out to Louis Bacosa for putting that together. Thanks very much. That's basically the major projects, not including things like elevators and mechanical systems. So those are the projects that have been completed in the last 10 years. We've invested nearly $60 million in this facility to make it our own and to maximize the potential. So when we think about this, and actually in this particular image you'll see over there on the right, there was a master plan that was developed back in 2010 that tried to guide us in terms of looking at the facility and how can we best utilize it for the programs that we had. And you can see we've certainly come a long way. But that was actually informed through strategic planning, and subsequently it was an iterative process with the strategic planning process. We had the plan in 2008 to 2013, which was sort of the basis for those conversations and discussions as to what should go where and how. Obviously then the next plan, 2013 to 2018, and now 2018 to 23, certainly adjusted to the facility, but we also adjusted our vision for the facility based upon the priorities of our strategic planning. Now, many of you know, and I've talked at college-wide meetings as well as faculty meetings, that this is a time when we need to be taking a very big look, a very long-term look. Strategic plans are great from a programmatic standpoint in terms of thinking about our programmatic priorities and how can we do what we need to do better, how can we advance our mission. But sometimes we do need to step back and not think just in 5-year chunks, but think in 20-year chunks. And that's particularly important with facilities. As anyone in facilities area can tell you, from start to finish of any given project is years, not months. And so taking that very long look And the challenge is, and I put it up there as simply a broad-based question for the community, which is, what is the best long-term 20-year plus strategy for the SUNY College of Optometry to ensure sustainability and optimal education and research environment from which to prepare future doctors of optometry, not just for New York State, but for the country? So today what I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about the past year. I want to talk about our impact. I want to talk about where we are. But I also want to start talking about laying the groundwork for that much bigger conversation. A number of people within the community have been doing a lot of work the last few months, trying to really sort of quantify and look at where we are, what we have, so we can begin to talk much more about what we need and what we need to think about. So as you all know, our current strategic plan, Care, Lead, Advance, really sort of brought together a number of elements within our conversations to be much more thematic, rather than structural or departmental in nature. But let's just take a quick look first at the past year. We've had a lot of achievements this past year. I think it's been a great year for the institution. And I'm not going to go through all of these in details. And by the way, this will be posted on the web and people can take a look at the details when you have the time. But certainly, we've continued to really look at high quality students, but we've also really been able to advance our commitment to diversity, particularly with underrepresented minority students. We've had a lot of advances within the curriculum, introduction of micro-credentials, the gap examinations, approval, and it will be coming forward with the current first year class is the idea of quarter system in the third year to help better prepare them and give them opportunities, particularly in terms of the boards. We improved. We had a bit of a dip in 2019 with some of our national boards, but we see it coming back with the class of 2020. And certainly residency programs, research funding, certainly congratulations to Dr. Bloomfield on his connection. Is Dr. Bloomfield here? There he is. With the licensing agreement for drug development in glaucoma with Connexin. We've signed master's agreements with the health and hospitals corporations. We've expanded our relationship with Community Health Network, with the IVAN, facilities improvements, jobs have been completed. And certainly we have a very strong financial position, which I will share with you in some detail. And certainly I think it's important to highlight we received two major gifts this year, although both under rather unfortunate circumstances. The first, of course, is Barbara Saltzman, for whom the new pediatric center is being named, who gave us a major gift and support. She unfortunately died a couple of weeks ago from pancreatic cancer. Then Dr. Bill Folsom, who was 99, not a surprise there necessarily, but Dr. Folsom was committed to the college for years and years, particularly to providing scholarships for our students. And he has left a bequest of his estate to the college that's still being processed, but our students are going to certainly benefit through his generosity. So just running through, some of the data, as you all know by now, this is the 13th time I've done this. I tend to love data. But certainly the quality indicators on our students remain strong. High GPAs, certainly high OAT scores. You can see over there on your right, the entering class was second highest in the country on their admissions test scores. And this is all being done in what's actually a very challenging environment. One of our biggest, I don't want to call it a threat, but one of our biggest concerns is in fact that based upon the applicant pool and the number of slots that have been opening up over the years, there's basically 1.4 applicants for every seat in the country. And so we've been able to preserve the quality of our students' body, but I think across the country people are really struggling to fill classes with well-qualified students. Now some of that, and this is always my favorite, one of my favorite graphs, and I know that it may not be Christian's favorite graph, because I'm very big on yield, and that is, we want the students that we want to want us as well. And we've done a great job over the years at about 64%, sort of settling into that mid-60s range, but you can see what's happened nationally. And we're actually got the third highest yield rate in the country. The other two, one is Berkeley, the other one right now is Houston. We've also been doing a very nice job with our diversity efforts. We have our diversity inclusion master plan, began 2016 to 2020, so it's time to refresh that, renew it, and think about it. But you can certainly see in terms of the bottom trend line, the red, that we're doing a much better job of finding well-qualified minority candidates, but also getting them to want us and to come to this institution. Right now, for the next class, I think you're up to around 14%, something like that. And originally, one of our goals was to get us into the same kind of category that the medical schools have. And we're very close if we're not there already. And I'm certainly happy to let you know it's not final, it's a tentative award letter. But Dr. Queen Nguyen was in charge of our C-STEP grant, and it was time for a major renewal. And so we just got notification 2 days ago, I guess it was, that in fact we have tentative approval for $950,000 spread out over the next 5 years to continue our efforts and commitment to diversity. So congratulations, Dr. Billy. We also have to consider our impact. I think we often do look at ourselves as though what we are is 100 degrees a year of OD students. In fact, between PhDs, masters, the advanced graduate certificate, as well as our residents, and we often overlook our residents in terms of when we think about educational impact. You know, while they're technically employees, they're also really still postgraduate students in terms of developing advanced skills, knowledge, and competency. So we're actually up to around 150 certificates and degrees awarded each year. Now, one of the challenges, the MBO, and the MBO is changing, but I think it's important for people to be aware and recognize. If you look at the top graphs, what you see is we remain always above the national average in terms of our students' performance, particularly on parts 1 and 2. And you can see that the class of 2019, which actually took the exams in 2018 on both of these graphs, dipped down, and it resulted in a lower pass rate at the time of graduation. Fortunately, you can also see the class of 2020 has now bounced back up, and we're hopeful. But what it meant was that actually last year, for the first time, the number of students who had not passed all three parts of the national boards had faltered and declined. And so certainly academic affairs, student affairs, everybody is going to work in terms of looking to try to look at ways to ensure that the students that do not pass the first time they take the exams are successful in subsequent efforts. It is a little bit challenging because in the past so few people have not passed the exam. Students find it very, very difficult to acknowledge that they need the help and come forward. Research, in terms of our counterparts across the country, this is ASCO data. It includes some things that things like the Research Foundation don't. But the ASCO data shows that we're number 3 in the country in terms of overall research funding among optometry programs nationwide. And certainly, and second highest in terms of industry support. Also breaking news, congratulations to Dr. Bloomfield's. It's still not, I guess, the final notification in terms of the number of slots that we've received. But Dr. Bloomfield has been working on that grant in terms of its 5-year renewal, and I guess we've gotten at least preliminary approval for that grant moving forward. So congratulations, Dr. Bloomfield. And certainly, you know, the success and part of the growth, particularly in industry funding and with clinical research, is our CVRC. And certainly there's a whole variety of reasons for moving it, but not the least of which is it needs more space. And so this, most of you have not looked inside, but this is the old procedures laboratory on 14. It has been gutted, you know, and we're awaiting the funding to move forward and begin construction on that project as well. Now, in terms of patient care, we're riding steady. I mean, I think one of our great challenges as we look ahead is we've sort of been flat in terms of our patient numbers. The bottom line is the 6-month number, top line is the 12-month number. We're holding our own, you know, but in fact, we have the capacity to do more, as you'll see in the future. But this year I was really very curious, and I wanted to sort of share. We've been doing some analyses, looking at everybody who's contributed to this data. Thank you very much. But really kind of looking at who are we serving, where are we serving, what is our reach? These are basically heat maps, distribution maps of our patients. Now, what's interesting, of course, is up on the left, you see a national picture, so our patients are kind of all over the country. Now, in all fairness, I think some of that is our students, families of our students, students who are living in New York City, but their permanent residence is somewhere else. But some of it is, I would have to say, it's got to be the great care we provide. And then if you look down here, this is the tri-state area. And I think certainly because of our location in Midtown Manhattan, what we really do is we have a very large portion of our population that comes to us because we are proximal to their workplace. And then over there on the right, what you see, and you start to see the different sized dots, is numbers representing different numbers and concentration of patients in different zip codes in the 5 boroughs and around the New York City area. And so when you look at it, we really do draw relatively equally, from 4 of the boroughs. Staten Island 1%, but that's Staten Island's, way over there. But Long Island, New Jersey, and others, including Connecticut, Pennsylvania, and I do like this phraseology of upstate New York. What they really mean is north of the Bronx. Now, some of this data can be analyzed in different ways and looks at different services. And I was very curious actually about the Vision Rehabilitation Service because it is such a grouping of services that are not easily found or provided elsewhere. But you actually see, and actually I think New Jersey got left out. There's definitely patients from New Jersey. But you can see it's a fairly large draw scattered throughout, much like the general patient population. But for certainly visually impaired traumatic brain injury patients, the issue of access is critical. Our outreach programs continue to grow, scattered certainly throughout Manhattan, a few down certainly in Brooklyn and Queens, and a couple, some up in the Bronx. But you start to look at the numbers and they're actually pretty impressive. Nearly 10,000 community members served through a variety of outreach programs. Our clinical affiliates, again, I think a testimony to the breadth and the reach of the college. We've got the world, sort of highlighting there's Australia and China, as well as North America, and then the Manhattan area. They're color-coded, more related to which are under contract, which are MOUs for educational purposes, which ones have residents, and which ones have students. And so just a little bit closer look at the affiliates. Again, concentrated more in Midtown. We do have a good number down in Brooklyn as well, and some in Queens. But over 240,000 patients. This number was actually taken from last year, but I think it's always important for us to remember it's not just the 70,000 patient visits that we see here on 42nd Street. It's all of the patients we see through those affiliations as well. And so getting close to, we'll have to actually measure it again. At some point we'll pass that 250,000 mark. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the international, but it is always interesting to remember that, in fact, we do a variety of programs to support optometry and the expansion of access to eye care throughout the world, everywhere from France and the West Bank to China, Australia, New Zealand, Nigeria, South Africa, and Haiti. So no annual State of the College report is complete, certainly without some discussion of finance and money. We have been successful, and this is just looking at operating budget. It doesn't include our capital, and it doesn't include our research foundation activities. But we've been able to consistently, at least in pure operating, keep our expenses below our revenues, which is good. It helps build our reserves and lets us do things that we might not be able to do otherwise. If we look at the revenue side, again, one of the challenges looking ahead is that, as you can see, the green is actually what we get from the taxpayer, from the state allocation. That's really been flat for the last 7 years. It's going to be flat probably for the next 7 years. And so we become much more dependent upon non-taxpayer revenues in terms of looking ahead to our own growth as an organization. Just a little note on the right, you'll see a little orange bar. Hopefully there will be an orange bar in the current years as well. That was actually additional support from the state because of the retroactive payments of the negotiated increases in the salaries. And so there's been some relief from the state, for the retroactive pay increases. We have seen some growth. Certainly, most of the growth seems to be with tuition, but as I've said in the past and still saying, we have to hold back in order to maintain our competitive position. So we're not really looking at any more than 2% max for the foreseeable future on tuition. You do see increased revenues from patient care. Some of that is the UEC. Some of that is actually our contracts, because we've expanded our contracts and reimbursements from the satellite clinics as well. Now on the expense side, I simplified this. Green is personnel, yellow is everything except personnel, blue is capital. Buying larger equipment or projects and some of those kinds of things. Now, what you'll notice is we've kind of kept, in the past, we've basically kept everything below, including the capital, below our revenue stream, which means that we've added to our reserves. This year is going to be different. Between the lower lobby and investing in equipment, and we have a major purchase order out there now for more simulation equipment for our students, but it's also as well as things like the pediatric center. We are investing heavily in terms of the capital needs, of our both academic and clinical programs. It goes back down again next year. In fact, the personnel costs go down again next year because once we pass this year, the retroactive pay increases are no longer, we kind of get back in. But you can see it's getting narrower. So we do have to be very cognizant of both our expenses, but also what we can do to generate revenues moving forward. So these are our fund balances. And it's really a reflection of that previous graph. This is what we sort of have in reserves. The green line is what we have in reserves. The red line is really what is expected as a minimum by the state university system in terms of really a safety valve, security valve. And we've been able to do that very well. Of course, historically, I keep this in because this was actually during that dip after the Great Recession in 2008, 2009. It took a little bit of a lag, but they reduced our state funding and we had to compensate. So since that time, again, that gap we've grown our reserves over time. Again, you can see, though, looking into the future, we'll go down next year most likely. And then we may be pretty flat because the difference between our expenses and revenues are tighter. Now, this one I really kind of like because we're at the top, which can be good, can be bad. Department of Education has what's known as financial composite scores for the private sector. And they look at all of the private institutions around the country. They do a number of ratio analyses, and they calculate out a composite score in terms of financial strength. In this, basically, anything in the blue here is strong financially, green is solid, and red is weak from a financial standpoint. State University of New York basically took that and applied it to all of the state-owned and operated campuses. I mean, what you can see is we're right here, Binghamton, and so on down the line. So we've certainly managed the institution, I think, in a very financially responsible way, and it's important that we kind of keep it that way. So from a overall institutional strength perspective, we're in really very good shape. We're in a very positive shape. But we do need to start thinking a lot more about how do we grow, how do we maintain that strength as we look to the future. And again, the financial planning is critical. Now, what it means is we sit and we actually feel pretty good. Everything is nice and shiny. We have mentioned in the past, we're a bit siloed. We're a very highly specialized institution within the state of New York. Our silo is in great shape, but we are siloed. We don't have the expansive programs that most of the campuses have, and we don't have some of the connections and some of the links that could be important to our future. So while we look at this, others may see this. We certainly need to make sure this is not what we are or what we become in the future. Now last year, and I'm sure everybody remembers last year's talk. Last year, I really took a look, or I tried to share, I think, a number of issues that we have to confront as a institution. One is certainly looking at the practitioner of the future, and that's always difficult to do. What's going to happen in healthcare? What kind of skill sets do our students require? As we do that, we have to certainly look at, often looking at sort of changes in the way we approach it, but we often will get pulled back by things like national boards, which tend to test to the past perhaps more than the future if we're not careful. We also talked about changes in optometric education, the educational environment, the practice environment that they're going to be entering into, and that those have changed in some very profound and meaningful ways. We also talked about some of the external environmental forces that are upon us, and one of them is related to those silos. That in fact, we are getting much more integrated. We really are part of the healthcare delivery system, whether that's electronic communications, physical proximity, team-based care, sharing of information. Population health is changing in health policy. So if we're not a part of the system, you end up risking sort of being left out or being an afterthought. The image on the right is for some of the faculty. It's just it's actually got nothing to do with this slide. I just wanted to put it somewhere. Because it is a symbol of the change. This is a contact lens dispenser that was outside of the men's and women's room of the Prague train station. So, in much of Europe, before your train arrives, you can go to the bathroom, and then on your way out, pick out a new set of contact lenses. Kind of runs against the grain, doesn't it? So let's talk a little bit about framework for the future, because of some of the work, I want to share some of the work that's being done, and certainly in the months to come, we need to have a lot more significant and meaningful conversations. But one of the first steps was really to assess our current infrastructure and our campus capacity. One of the first steps was certainly thinking and saying, what do we do in this property now? And it's not just the College of Optometry. It's not 100 optometry students per year. Besides our own degree programs, master's, PhDs, MSODs, certificates, we've got Stony Brook MSW program. We do have students on Saturdays, whether you know it or not, 30 students on Saturdays completing the executive MBA program of Binghamton University. And we have our 41 residents. We have 570 degree certificate candidates being educated in this facility. And then we have a lot of non-student users. We've got SUNY system. I keep discovering how fine our security system is. They were able to tell us, oh, sure, 9,064 registered students to visit the 18th floor. We have non-degree students from NYU, Center for Continuing Professional Education, doing, I think that's a real estate course. And then we've got our own Center for Continuing Professional Education, 1,441 registrants, certainly more hours than that. I think it's, 9,295 contact hours over the year. And then we have international visiting scholars as well, 114 last year. So for the non-students, we also had 10,649 people who came into this building for a variety of purposes. The 69,626 from our patient base. And then we have a total of 343 employees, including Stony Brook and the Welcome Center up on 18. So we have to look at the facility as a whole in terms of the programs that it contains, as well as the impact that we have. Now, I asked David Bowers and his team to really start going back and laying the groundwork for doing a space analysis. That's effectively the start of when you do a master plan for a facility. How much do you use? Now, we made an assumption. I asked them to make the assumption that the teaching laboratories on the 16th floor become the research laboratories as we're planning. The 14th floor CVRC is completed. The 10th floor pediatric unit and the 7th floor primary care are all completed. So we were looking at space that included not just where we are now, but the way we think we will be within the next couple of years. And once they took away all the walls and all of the elevators and all of the staircases, we ended up with 184,184 square feet. Now, the whole facility on the outside is 298,000 square feet. So you can see that there's a good amount of space that goes to things like just going up and down between floors. When we started looking at the whole facility, we also said, assume that the entire building is ours. You know, don't worry about any other program other than the College of Optometry right now. Having other people in the building, sharing the building is a good thing to do, but it's a decision. And so assume that everything is ours, the entire facility, including the 18th floor, for college use. These numbers still need to be adjusted, but actually when we started to break it down and start looking at use, and we looked at the teaching and learning spaces of the college, and you can certainly see here teaching laboratories, library and quiet study, learning support, the theater, lecture halls, and seminar rooms. Now what's interesting is we actually don't use our space very much. Now most of you would say, yes we do, I can't find a room. Well, we're using it for a lot of things, but not necessarily degree-related or certificate-related activities. You know, and so, you know, we do have a variety of specialized laboratories, but lecture halls on the first floor, they're the lecture halls we use. I think somebody corrected me and said we use the 206 for 2 hours. So we have a whole lecture hall that's used for 2 hours a week. You know, if you think about the whole building, you've got Alumni Commons up on the 18th floor, which registers as 0 use by us. And part of the plans on 14 included another room much like 222, so that was included in the analysis. But even the lecture halls we use all the time, if you look at operating hours between 8 o'clock and 6 o'clock during the 5 days of the week, we still only use those between 50 and 60% of the time. So in terms of degree-related activities, there's a lot of room for growth if we choose to do it. We also have some specialized areas. We've got 2 vision science labs that total 2,500 square feet that are used for about 6 hours a week. So as we look to the future, we really also need to think about the efficient and practical and appropriate use of space and what we can do with that space. Research and patient care, with the new layouts and the changes on 16 and 14, about 20,000 square feet of lab space is totally available. Expansion of wet research labs, dry research labs, clinical research. You know, that certainly allows for growth, and we'll go through it a little bit more. In patient care, we have about 30,000 square feet, and we'll talk about that in terms of capacity. When you break down the lab, this is just, again, you know, what we actually included in the analysis. But, you know, when you take into account some of the new space, some of the space that, you know, may be unfunded, some of the space that could be used more efficiently than it is, we actually have some significant opportunities to grow our research from the basic through the translational to the clinical as we look to the future. Now for the clinical faculty, don't worry, I've got to put in the caveat. With every use of space comes costs. You know, this whole exercise is to look at the upside of our capacity, not necessarily how much it's going to cost. So I asked Lidovina Martinez-Gonzalez and to take a good look and start to look at the capacity. What we meant was assume the renovations of 7 and 10, But if all of our units were operating during all 15 sessions, so we assumed 44 weeks of operation, we assumed 15 sessions, same teaching ratios, same appointment schedules, same no-show rates, Tuesday mornings closed for meetings, what would that number be? How many patients would come through? 139,073. So 2 times our current capacity. Now, that doesn't mean, well, given the fact that we've been at the same capacity for the past decade, it's not something that is easy to do, but we do have growth potential at hand. And as I said, with the caveat, if you grow more patients, you need more staff. If you know how to grow patients, you need more faculty. So some key conclusions as we begin the conversation looking at the future. We are financially strong. We do have the ability to chart new directions. Our campus can support a significant increase in existing programs or new complementary initiatives. So if we think about new degree programs, or if we want to partner with others, with other institutions to deliver programs that are complementary to ours, we can do so. Research, certainly that growth is going to be there. And the success, burden of success is really upon us, in terms of continuing a positive trajectory and hiring the right people. And patient care, certainly the capacity is there as well. So we actually have, between tuition, partnership agreements, patient care, research grants, I pointed out that the state support is not going to go up. We do have a lot of opportunities at our disposal to grow, and the real question becomes, how do we grow in a way that makes us stronger? And how do we grow in a way that makes the optometry program and the PhD and the master's programs the best in the country? And there's always the buts. Okay, so we've done some analysis of the facility. Is there enough? There's still limits. We're not getting another building in Midtown Manhattan. We're not going to be able to build up. So, if we're looking in that 20-year venue, is the capacity that we have enough to do what we can dream of doing? Can we sufficiently address, because no matter what, we are a bit siloed here. We can bring in other programs. Can we sufficiently address IPE or interprofessional education to better prepare our students for their future in the healthcare system? Can we provide our students, can we provide you with personal professional resources, to thrive in this kind of professional and educational environment? Certainly we provide a lot of benefits, but a bigger university, a bigger campus, those things can provide a lot of infrastructure and a lot of service support that we just don't have. What are the opportunities available through partnership with other health professions? And there's probably other questions that will come out. So the next phase of this conversation, and a big chunk is going to start to happen soon. This is on the agenda of the faculty retreat. It's an important conversation, but that conversation has to look very much at the future of our program, the kinds of other programs that would be most appropriate to link in or to co-locate with our existing programs. What is the best way to use the capacity we have, and what does that program really need to prepare the Doctor of Optometry candidates for the future? And certainly looking at organizational structures and partnerships, the importance of our current location. Now, if you think about those patient care maps, a lot of our patient care is occurring partially linked to our location. And so if we ever thought about any kind of move, what would be the impact on that program? It would be substantial. And so that certainly is a red flag, in terms of doing anything terribly precipitous. We do have to think carefully. On the other hand, one of the things my observation is in doing this is we have all of our eggs in one basket. Everything we really do is here. We do have options we could consider. Should we be opening up UEC North? UEC South, just to make Lidovina nervous. There you go. But one of my concerns is we've been flat at 70,000 patients for so long. Is that actually sort of our saturation point? Is that what we can do here, or can we do more? And if we can't, do we have to think of other alternatives as well? So these are the kinds of conversations that is going to be important to have as we look at that 20-year kind of a time frame, and making sure that we're in a position to thrive as an institution, but in a position for our students to thrive and our patients to be well served going forward. So with that, I'm ending this with more questions than answers, but I did really want to be sure that we provided an update, gave you an opportunity to understand the work that is being done, and begin to think a little bit about what the implications are, not just for the next 5 years. We've got a great strategic plan for the next, well, now we're down to 3.5 years. But in order to keep those strategic plans going, what are the kinds of decisions we're going to need to make, and what are the right decisions for our community? Thanks very much.